We continue our health and wellness series discussing mental health, specifically suicidal awareness. Joy in the City is a program that highlights people and organizations having an impact in our city. All too often, we hear about the problems and dysfunction in our culture, but we are coming with a different approach as we take a look at the good things that are going on right here in our community. I'm Bethany Marshall, and you're about to see what God is doing in our city. We want to thank our program sponsors, Park Home, for their donation of furniture used in our studio, as well as Taylor Design and Events for beautifully decorating our studio space. If you have any furniture or design needs, these organizations are top-notch in our book. Thanks. Our focus for a few episodes will be on mental health. This isn't something that we take lightly or brush off as unnecessary. Today's topic is specifically in the realm of addressing suicidal awareness. Troy Ferguson sits down with a specialist concerning this topic.
Janice, I want to first of all say thank you for joining with me today to chat a little bit about this. These are a couple topics we've been covering on health and wellness, specifically when it comes to the mind, and this is something that's going to be a tough topic that people need to be aware of and talk about. But first of all, give me a little bit about your background, if you can.
I've worked in the human service sector for almost 40 years of my life in one capacity or another. And for the past 16 years, I've been the executive director of a crisis line. And it's based in South Carolina, where I spent 20 years of my life. But I've recently moved back home to Central PA, and I'm still working as the executive director at my agency based in South Carolina. But I work remotely from Pennsylvania, and I go to South Carolina about a month to have meetings and whatnot with staff. But we are also a 2-in-1 agency. We have always operated 24/7, 365 days a year. And we moved from a 100% volunteer base to staff in 2006 when we were able to receive some county funding to support the work that we do. And with that, it created the opportunity for us to raise the bar with staff training. Because with volunteers, while we appreciate the use of volunteer time, it's hard to keep them engaged for long periods of time. You train them and then they move on. And it takes quite a bit of training to do what we do, especially when it comes to suicide prevention and intervention. So having staff has been critical to our overall mission. And I have staff that have been with me for at least 10 years. They come, they stay, they love the work that we do, they're mission-minded, because it's more about that than the paycheck. So it's finding the right fit for the work that we do. So It's been very good.
So let's talk about that. How big is the suicide problem?
Well, it's tremendous, and it's actually growing. I had pulled some statistics for this interview. I don't usually look at statistics that much because when you're doing it day in, day out, it's one call at a time or one person at a time. But statistics are important when you're trying to raise money and look at it from a community perspective. So I pulled some information strictly for Pennsylvania. And it looks like for Pennsylvania that one person dies by suicide every 5 hours.
Oh my.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. And nearly 3 times as many people die by suicide in Pennsylvania annually than by homicide.
Wow.
So it's the 11th leading cause of death overall in the state. So that's tremendous.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and nationally, it is the 10th cause of death in the United States.
We in our community have heard stories of this, so this isn't something that's just in New York or LA. This is something, it's everywhere. We, in our own community, have heard just heartbreaking stories of this. What are some of the warning signs that someone is struggling with thoughts of suicide?
People that feel hopeless or helpless. One of the commonalities that I have found through this work is that everyone who is considering suicide doesn't have hope. People say they have no reason to go on living. People say that sometimes just in passing. Oh, it wouldn't matter if I woke up tomorrow, or so-and-so wouldn't care if I were here. My children would be better off without me. Statements like that, we've probably all heard them at one time or another, but we pass them off as someone just, being overwhelmed. People that sleep too much or too little. People that eat too much or too little. People that engage in impulsive or reckless behaviors. People that sometimes avoid social interactions. People that express rage where they otherwise are not that type of person. Intentions to seek revenge, or are dramatic and have a negative mood change. Showing signs of extreme anxiousness or agitation. Now, the warning signs that I would consider to be to the level that someone is in imminent danger are the following. Making a will, and this is something just sporadic, not something that's planned. Putting their affairs in order. Giving away beloved possessions. That's a sign. Searching for means of doing personal harm. It could be an internet search, or asking someone, do you know where I could get a gun? Do you know where I could get these type of pills? Dramatic mood swings in the positive. People sometimes have a misconception about, well, he seemed well, or he was doing bad last week, but this week there's been a change. He seems to be really well. When you see a drastic mood change, even for the better, sometimes it's because that person has made the decision to complete suicide and they're at peace with it. So you have to, tune into that also. And talking about suicide is a way out. Talking, writing, or thinking about it. Sometimes in the world we live in now with social media, you'll see things on Facebook. In my work, I know quite a few people, and I will monitor Facebook for phrases that I think might be a cry for help. And I'll reach out and contact that person. Are you okay? And people that are saying goodbye to family and friends, like they're never going to see them again, without any real information about, where they're going or anything. Just trying to find closure. Those are all warning signs.
How do you determine, where's the fine line of it's someone just seeking some sort of response or attention versus this is a serious concern? How do you determine that?
Okay, good question. Actually, you're correct, there are people that are attention seekers, and they might use that, whatever it is to get the desired, result that they're hoping for, where someone's going to say, are you okay? They constantly need that. I personally prefer to always look at that as a possible indicator. So reach out to them just to be sure. What's the worst thing that can happen? You're wrong. Wrong in the fact that everything is okay and they are just attention seeking, because there could be that time. Maybe they are trying to get attention, but the first time they don't, then they complete.
Yeah.
There is no real fine line. And sometimes it comes down to how well do you know the person that's actually behaving that way. Is it a pattern?
Yeah.
But I always, like I said, weigh on the side of caution and go ahead and, make that conversation happen with them. Ask them if they're okay.
Sure. So tell me, what factors or commonalities would an individual have that makes them at risk for suicide, considering suicide?
They have found that childhood abuse and trauma is like one of the main underlying sources, because that is something that impacts your entire life, growing through, young adulthood into adulthood. So anyone who has a background of that is definitely at higher risk. A history of being abused, domestic violence, child abuse, or witnessing continuous abuse. And that is abuse of animals also. Social loss, relationships. That is another huge indicator that someone could be at risk. how many times have you heard over and over where so-and-so just broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend and then they completed suicide? It tends to be an impulsive act, but relationships mean a lot to us. And sometimes when a relationship has ended, someone can't see that there's hope, to go on. So a lot of suicides happen after a relationship ends. And that could be divorce also. Access to lethal means. I don't get into the discussion of guns, whether you should have them or not, but it does show that if there is access to them, like if you're a child and your parents own guns, and if they're not responsible in the way that they keep them in their homes, like under lock and key, where they're accessible, that could increase someone's likelihood to complete. The same with medication. Being responsible with medication in your home. If you take medications that could cause, an overdose, you want to make sure you do something to keep them out of reach of children or teens, because that's another way that increases the risk of suicide. Anyone who has a substance abuse disorder, mental illness, diagnosed and undiagnosed. There are a lot of people that have undiagnosed mental health issues that they will complete. Family history of suicide actually increases your likelihood.
Wow.
Substantially. So, previous suicide attempts by the person, someone might have tried and nobody even knew about it. They survived that first attempt, so a second or third attempt could happen.
How often does that happen, that someone who attempted didn't succeed and you find that they do attempt again? What's the statistics on something like that? Do you know?
Statistically, I don't know, but I think that what I've read, that it takes sometimes 3 times before someone. So it's proven that people do attempt several times before they complete.
So it's pretty common.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We call them significant life events, and they are anything that can produce anxiety, stress, job loss, looking for a job, not being able to find one, having a chronic disease can be something. A lot of older people have diseases and their friends have all passed on, so they feel alone and isolated. So dealing with age plus disease increases the likelihood. Also, incarceration. People that have been incarcerated and are coming back into society, it's difficult for them because they don't always have the support that they need to be successful. So that increases people's risk. And just basically being exposed to suicide, you have to be very careful also in how you talk about suicide. Like our conversation today, we have to be careful not to, I don't want to say glorify it, but we just have to be careful how we talk about it. If you notice, whenever a celebrity passes, they will talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And since my agency used to be a lifeline, we noticed that our call volume would go up because people would connect with that person that was famous, and it would actually increase their suicidal thoughts.
Is there anything that can protect a person from thinking about suicide or reduce the likelihood of them completing suicide?
Yes, I think support systems.
Okay.
Bottom line, whatever they are, family, friends, good mental health, having access to good mental health treatment and therapy and medication management often, is one of the things. Being aware of what's available in the community that can help support you in your time of need. And I have to say faith-based as well. Now, in my line of work, they try to discourage you to pray with people or to even bring God into the conversation. I bring God into the conversation. When you are on the end of a line or face-to-face with someone who is thinking about ending their life, and you have gone through everything in the conversation to find out what their reason for living might be, and you can't even find one. I think you're doing them an injustice if you don't ask them what their relationship is with God. Do you attend church? Have you ever in the past? And you say it in a way that's non-judgmental, but you want to visit that. And most people, I have found, will say, I went as a child, I went for years, but I feel that God has turned his back on me, that I wouldn't be welcome in church because I feel this way, or I have messed my life up so horribly that there's no redemption for me. So I encourage them to, reach out to a pastor near them or to visit a church and to build that faith family. And then I've prayed with people, because you have to give that person hope, not false hope, but hope. And personally, I know that, through God, all is possible, and that you can stay alive. And the suicide is preventable. It's just a moment in someone's life, and that moment could last a day, a week, months. It can last forever, but with the right tools in place, you can survive suicide.
We will conclude this week's story with Janice Decker in a few moments. But first, I want to talk to you about what we have in store for next week. Along the same line as mental health and suicide awareness, we will talk to Terry Lee, the mother of Philip Lee Jr., who died by suicide in 2018. Here's a glimpse of Philip Lee Jr.'s passion and love for music.
Daddy was a preacher, she was his wife, just trying to make the world a little better, shine a light. And people started talking just to hear their own voice. Those people try to accuse my father, saying he made the wrong choice. And though it might be painful, the time will always tell. Those people have long since gone, my father never will. 'Cause even when the rain falls, even when the flood starts rising, even when the storm comes, 'cause I am washed by the water, 'cause even when the rain falls, 'cause even when the flood starts rising, even when the storm comes, 'cause I am washed by the water, 'cause even when the earth crumbles under my feet, 'cause even when the ones I love turn around and crucify me, 'cause I will never ever let you down. So all I have is yours around me, even when the rain falls, even when the flood starts rising, even when the storm comes. I am washed by the water, 'cause even when the rain falls, even when the flood starts rising, even when the storm comes, I am washed by the water.
Be sure to check out next week's show. Now let's return to our conversation with Janice Decker as she discusses the common myths concerning suicide.
One of the main myths is that if you talk about suicide, someone's going to go out and complete suicide. That is definitely a myth, because it goes back to the stigma surrounding the entire subject of suicide, where people don't feel comfortable talking about it. They don't, even now.
Sure.
Even people that come to work for me and I train them how to take these calls, it's difficult for them to ask direct questions like, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? We never use the term, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Because that could be cutting other behaviors, but asking that direct question. It's actually been proven that if you ask the person the direct question, are you thinking about suicide? It lets that person know that you are a safe place, that you can have that conversation with them, and that they will open up and say, wow, I can finally talk to someone about this, because
Yeah.
they've historically not found that. And then from there you go on and you ask them, have you thought about how you would do that? And that's another uncomfortable thing to ask. But people will mostly say, yes, I have. I've thought about shooting myself. And then it's just amazing what, breaking down that stigma and that myth, and just asking that direct question.
I think that most people are scared to bring it up, so they just keep silent.
Yes.
So the reality of what you're saying is actually it is preferred that you ask. If someone is actually considering this, they want someone to notice.
Yes.
And whenever you bring it up, it actually is a help
Yes.
for them.
Yes, it is. And again, what's going to happen if you're wrong and that
Sure.
person isn't thinking about it? They'll let you know. They'll say, hey, I'm okay. I'm just having a bad time. And then you can take it a little further, have that conversation a little bit longer, and ask appropriate questions to find out, are they really okay, or are they just trying to throw you off the trail? And in my experience in 16 years, I've not had anybody that's not been honest and open and wanted to continue the conversation, or if I were wrong, gave me enough reason to believe that I was wrong. So
Sure.
there was no need to continue that conversation. But other myths are that you have to be mentally ill to think about suicide or to complete suicide. It's not true. 54% of people that complete don't have a diagnosed mental health issue or illness. Now, that doesn't mean they don't exist, but they haven't been diagnosed. So in that statistical number are people that have no mental health history. Also, there's a myth, and I've heard this over and over again, where people say that others that commit suicide, that's the word, like it's a crime. It is not a crime to commit suicide. So I think just by using that word, we attach a stigma to it. And I bring that up because I know people who are survivors of suicide. They've lost loved ones to suicide, and they feel that their loved one has committed a crime. And that's hard for them to deal with. So the word commit, I try to replace that with complete, or that this person suicided. It just feels better if there's anything that can make the subject feel better. Another myth is that people that complete suicide are taking the easy way out and they were selfish. That's not true. People that suicide are hurting really bad. And it's not so much that they want to die, but they can't live with the pain for whatever they're dealing with. So.
Now, as a community, we believe wholeheartedly about a faith-based community coming together and different things. How can we as a community help prevent this or diminish the numbers? What can we do from your experience and your responses? What can we do as a faith community, especially in this situation?
I think as a faith community, you have a really unique opportunity because you have every Sunday and every Wednesday night, or whenever you have your services, you have an opportunity to get to know the people in your church. That is more than some other organizations that aren't faith-based that might not meet as often. So you have an opportunity to get to know people and build relationships with them. At the root of all of this there's three things. One is prevention, and that would be your trainings to learn what the signs are, the warning signs of suicide. And that can be taught, through the churches, and actually very successfully through the churches. So prevention, intervention, which is the next step where people learn how to intervene and provide that life-saving step to get the person to help, to get them to counseling or to the next layer, which would be postvention. And postvention is usually your mental health providers and anything that keeps someone from going back and revisiting, the thoughts of suicide. Also reducing the stigma, giving this a safe place for people to talk openly about it, that they can come to you or to whoever. Maybe there's just a few people that feel comfortable talking about it, but making it known who those individuals are in the church.
Yeah.
Because not everybody is called to do that.
Sure.
And it truly is a gift. I truly believe that. And I feel that I'm where I am because God ordered my steps to do what I am doing. I didn't ask for it. I would have run from it. But I was placed where I am, and I'm actually still there because I haven't been giving my orders to leave yet. So while I'm there, I've hopefully helped in some way. It's been very humbling because I think when someone shares with you their deepest fears and their thoughts, and it like I said, it's very humbling to be part of that.
Yeah, I got to say that as a pastor, I see hurting people all the time, and we are a culture of hurting people, and with social media, it just magnifies pain.
Yes.
And I think it's so valuable what you do. And I am grateful that there are people like you, organizations like you're a part of, that are available to take this to the next level. I mean, I can talk to somebody and from a spiritual approach and everything, but I know sometimes it's beyond my capacity.
Sure.
That they need to be able to talk to someone who is more trained and equipped in this. And I'm grateful that you and your organization exists for these kind of situations.
Thank you, and I'm grateful for what you do. And it takes all of us. We all serve a critical role and are a critical piece of this puzzle that makes up a community.
Yeah.
And it's knowing where our piece is, what it is, and where we fit into it. And not everybody can do certain things. I couldn't do what you do. So it's nice when we see it all come together
Absolutely.
for the greater good.
Indeed.
That's all the time we have today. Thanks for watching Joy in the City True Stories. Let me encourage you to watch other episodes of people and organizations having an impact in our community through Facebook and YouTube channel. Then join us back here next week at the same time for another True Story episode. Be encouraged because God is moving in our city.